Hi there, and welcome to part 3 of A Dance with Dragons Explained. If you haven't watched part 1 and 2 yet, please click the link above. Now, picking up from where we left off last time, chapter 51. Theon Greyjoy is with some of the Spearwives, Rowan as well as Abel. He tells them that it is madness to try to escape, as Ramsay Bolton will chase them and hunt them down with his dogs. Abel replies that Stannis must be close by the sounds of the horns, and it is unlikely Ramsay would ride out into that. Theon also begs that he not be allowed to fall back into Ramsay's hands alive, to which Squirrel replies Abel's word. Hostine Frey barges into the halls, announcing that little Walder, son of his brother Merritt, has been killed. Theon looks at the Spearwives, but Rowan replies that this is no work of theirs. Big Walder implicates the Manderley men, saying that the boy went out to get some silver owed to him. The dispute turns into a spar of words, and when Lord Wyman Manderley insults both the dead boy and House Frey simultaneously, Hostin draws his sword in a blind fury and attacks Manderley, who is sliced under his chins and collapses. His knights leap to defend him, and a vicious and bloody fight breaks out. In the end, 6 White Harbour men lie dead, 2 Frey men as well as Lutton, one of Ramsay's bastard boys. Roose and Ramsay quell the tension by telling the men present if they want blood, they should turn their anger on Stannis. Hostin replies, once they bring Stannis' head, they will come for Wyman's. Roose asks Abel to play them a song, and the Freys leave. It is then that Rowan grasps Theon's arm, telling him that the time must be now and that Abel can fend for himself. The plan is to dress the fake Arya up as Squirrel, while the real Squirrel climbs away down the hole. They find the girl in her room, where she is terrified to leave, thinking this is a trap set up by Ramsay. The girl tells the washwoman that she has been trained. She won't escape. Ramsay does not need to chop off her feet. They finally get her into Squirrel's clothes, and Theon tells her to follow Holly closely and not to run. As they get to the gate, they see some guards. Holly seduces one and kills him in the process, while Frenya struggles and kills the other. Jean lets out a scream in the process, revealing them. Frenya waits at the bottom and fights the rest of the kneelers that come to catch them, while Holly and the others get to the top of the wall. Holly then realizes that Frenya has the rope, just before being killed by arrows. Theon thinks that if they are caught now, they'll be brought to Ramsay and tortured. He then throws himself and Jane over the battlements. Chapter 52. Daenerys bathes in preparation for her visit with her husband to Meereen's fighting pits. So Barristan Selmy tells her that the girl Merys, whom they set free, said that the Windblown were willing to join her cause if Dany gave the tattered prince Pentos. Dany cannot agree to pay this, as Illaroy is from that city and has helped her more than anyone. Her obligations are to him first. She departs with her husband, and they arrive at the pits, where strong Belwas eats a bowl of fried locusts. Hisdar tells his wife that they are tasty as well, but she declines as Dany is not interested in the spicy food. There are 20,000 spectators in the pit. As Hisdar announces the fights, they chant her name, though they use the Giscari word for mother, because they cannot pronounce her Westerosi name. Dany thinks to herself that it is not her they love, but the fighting. The first fight begins with a victory for the spotted cat, and there are many more after that. Following them, the first folly of the day begins with 2 dwarfs jousting, one on a pig, the other on a dog. One dwarf has a shield painted in the colours of House Lannister, which amuses Daenerys. That one falls off the pig and is chased by the other on the dog when Hisdar tells Dany that they are about to loose the lions. She tells him that this was not in their agreement, that the dwarves did not consent to this like the other fighters who died did, so she forbids that the lions slaughter the dwarfs. Up next is a bout between Barsana Blackhair and a boar. The fight goes well until the boar's tusk rips her open from the knee to the crotch. The boar then jumps on her, pulling out her entrails, and all to the displeasure of the crowd. Daenerys insists on leaving as she is disgusted and no longer wants any part in this. Strong Belwas becomes sick from his locusts, asking for a drink of milk. It is then that Drogon appears, his attention drawn by the blood and screams. His fire sears the boar before he eats it, and then Barsana. a man runs to try to kill the dragon, jabbing a spear into Drogon's neck. Before the dragon kills him, Hizdahr commands the rest of his spearmen to kill the dragon. Drogon roasts 2 spearmen, breaks the pitmaster in 2 with a swipe of his tail, and tears out the innards of another spearman. As Strong Belwas is puking, Dany runs into the fighting pit in a mad state, hearing footsteps behind her. When she gets close, she fears the dragon does not recognize her and will kill her. As he blows fire at her, she rolls under the flames, and she whips him until finally he allows her to mount him. She leaps onto his back, pulling out the spear. As she whips him again, he takes flight, and she tells him to go higher, watching as Meereen grows smaller below. Chapter 53. Jon treats with Tormund Giantsbane. His 4,000 wildlings will be allowed past the wall, including mammoths and giants. They must leave 100 boys as hostages at Castle Black, and yield all valuables to pay for food. The mammoths are to go the long way around Eastwatch, while the rest are allowed to go through the gates. Jon accompanies Val to go see Queen Selyse to tell her of the bargain. The Queen is excited and tells him that her husband will be proud. All the wildlings will have to do is swear fealty to the king and convert to R'hllor. This is when Jon tells her that this was not part of the bargain, and Val adds that the free folk do not kneel. Selyse is quite upset about this. Val notices Shireen's facial disfigurements, noting that it is grey death. Jon tells her that it is not always fatal, but she is adamant that it is death, and that the baby monster must be taken out of the tower at once and closer to her own person. She insists that Shireen is dead and that the Queen and apparently Jon cannot see it. He then goes to the top of the wall, wondering what has happened to Mance Rayder and if he has found his sister Arya. Up here he meets Torgon Flint of the First Flints and Brandon Norrie, the Norrie clan chief. Jon tells them that the wildlings are coming through, though they are not happy about it because of past conflicts. He tells them that they must forgive crimes of the past if they are to live together. They are worried about their lands, but Jon tells them that wildlings are to remain on the wall in the abandoned castles. Bowen Marsh sees this agreement as a betrayal of Jon's vows to the Night's Watch. However, Jon says that he has sworn to defend the realms of men and asks him whether the people beyond the wall don't count as men. Thus, it is his intent to use all available resources to defend the realm of men against the others. Chapter 54. Cersei is still a prisoner of the faith. She wonders when Jaime will be coming for her, in addition to wondering what has happened to Loras Tyrell, as last she heard he lay dying from his wounds on Dragonstone. She only ever sees 3 people, which are her jailers: Septa Unella, Septa Morel, and Septa Scholara. Her last visitor was Qyburn. She hates all 3 of them as much as those she assumes have betrayed her, blaming Osney Kettleback, Aunton Merryweather, Harry Swift, Oraine Waters, and Grand Maester Pycelle. She questions whether she should include Jaime in that group, but will not believe it. He would not abandon her, she assumes. She feels helpless and hates that emotion, and she prays endlessly to the 7 gods, since that is what they want. But it helps not. At first she fights with her guards, but they are much stronger than she thought. They keep her up endlessly, never letting her sleep. Exhausted, she comes to know that she must confess. She asks to be taken to the High Septon to confess, where she admits to extramarital affairs. She says she has slept with Lancel and the Kettleblack brothers. She insists she did these things because she was afraid for her children, and these were her only means to secure the trust of these men. The High Sparrow still means to accuse her of high treason, incest, regicide, and deicide, all crimes that Osney admitted Cersei had a part in under torture. She manages to talk her way out of the charges of murdering the previous High Septon and Robert, and bearing false witness against the Tyrell girls, and avoids the charges of incest by saying that these are lies that Stannis has made up in order to gain the Iron Throne, which satisfies the High Septon, since the Faith is eager to condemn Stannis' worship of a red demon. To get the real truth though, the High Septon means to have her tried by the Faith or trial by combat, where Cersei would be represented by a knight of the King's Guard. He is unsure of all the crimes she has committed, so the only way to pick the truth from the false is to let the gods decide. She is allowed a visit by her uncle Kevin, who, though angry with her for corrupting Lancel, answers her questions. He tells her that Jaime is missing after his return from Raventree Hall, having disappeared with an unknown woman, though they assume it is Brienne. There is word of sellswords appearing all over the south. They do not have the strength to deal with them, though Mace Tyrell does. However, he is unwilling to do so until the matter with his daughter Marjorie Tyrell is settled. Mace Tyrell is now the Hand, Paxter Redwyn is the King's Admiral, and Randall Tarley is the Justiciar. The Tyrells brought up an army when their daughters were seized. Although the High Septon has admitted the case against them is weak, Kevin brings worse news for Cersei. He relays Balon Swan's news of Marcella's loss of an ear and Aerys Oakheart's death, though Cersei is insistent that Marcella's mutilation is Tyrion's doing, and she sees a chance in the open position in the Kingsguard, and asks Kevin to approach Qyburn for a replacement. Chapter 55. Daenerys has not returned. Many fear her dead. The Dothraki are searching for her across the Worm River. Strong Belwas is still in mortal danger from the poison locust that he ate during the reopening of the fighting pits, and so Barristan Selmy does not trust the Blue Graces that are taking care of him now. Jogo, Darion O'Harris, Admiral Grolio, and Hero of the Unsullied all remain prisoners of the Yunkai. So Barristan is told by Hizdar's seneschal, Reznak, that Hizdar wishes to receive his Yonkaiish guest without Barristan there, essentially removing the duties of the head of the Queen's Guard. Of all of Dany's servants, only Missandei remains within the royal apartments, although she too has been replaced. The Unsullied have been slighted by Hizdar, and the brazen beasts might well be more loyal to Scarhaz Mokandik than to Hizdar. So the king lets himself be defended by pit fighters while he prepares for the peace discussions with the Yunkai. Meanwhile, disease has spread throughout Meereen, both in the city itself and among the Yonkaiish men camped outside it, despite the best of Dany's earlier efforts. Due to this, the streets are extremely quiet. Barristan is in a depressed and reflective state, wondering how he lost Dany like he lost her father and brother, as well as King Robert. He remembers how he ran too slowly after Dany, pondering if Daario would have run faster. As Drogon took to the air with Dany on his back, spears and crossbow bolts were targeted at him, wounding him. In reply, he loosed his fire upon them, killing 214 people and wounding 3 times as many. Rumour has it that the Yunkai sieging Meereen have mounted scorpions around the city in an attempt at slaying Drogon, should he return. As he thinks that she may be flying home, Missandei appears behind him. She tells him that Dany would not leave without them. She also says that Scarhaz wishes to meet with him, secretly. Barristan agrees to a meeting at the stables at sunset. There, the Shave Pate says that the sons of the Harpy poisoned the locust that Belwas ate, intending to kill Dany, that Volantis has dispatched its fleet, and that Hizdar means to open Meereen's gates for them. Scarhaz asks him to speak to Grey Worm, as he will trust Barristan and support them. Selmy agrees to conspire with the Shave Plate against Hizdar, and to attack the unsuspecting Yunkai before the fleet from Volantis can arrive to take the city and enslave all Dany's people. He does this on the condition that Hizdar's guilt can be proven, and Barristan thinks to himself that he will kill the man personally. Barristan says that he will go speak to Grey Worm. Chapter 56. Victorian Greyjoy's fleet is anchored near the Isle of Cedars, right outside Slaver's Bay. He was sent by his brother, King Euron Greyjoy, to bring Daenerys to him, but Victarion means to take her to wife himself. Victarion's shield hand was hurt fighting Talbot Seri in the Battle of the Shield Islands, and the wound has festered. Maester Kerwin has had little success treating the wound. Victarion learnt that the strong Valentine fleet is on their way to Meereen too, while his own fleet was scattered on their way and only half have come back together. The 54th ship to arrive, the Grief, has happened upon the Red Priest Makoro, who was swept overboard the Selasori Quoran when Tyrion travelled her to Meereen. He claims to have seen in the flames that Victorian would die unless the priest helped him. Mikoro succeeds in healing him, and Victorian has the maester killed and makes for Meereen. Chapter 57. Yezin Yo Kazak is dying of the bloody flux. A healer explains to Sweets that the only help for Yezin is good clean water. Nurse also got the bloody flux and died the night before, after Tyrion gave him dogtail soup with silver mushrooms in the broth. Tyrion asks Scar, a soldier slave in Yezin's ownership, to send 2 men to get fresh water for Yezin. Scar refuses because he will not take orders from a slave, even though he himself is a slave. He tells Tyrion to get the water himself with Penny. Tyrion asks for the mule and the cart to get the water. Scar refuses, but gives them Jorah Mormont to help get the water. The 3 of them travel through the camp to the nearest well, south and west of a trebuchet, the Heradian. On the way, Tyrion sees defences being built to defend against the possible return of Drogon, although Tyrion knows that most of these will prove useless against dragons, because a dragon's eyes are its only weak spot, and not the underbelly or throat, as old wives' tales claim. While waiting at the well, they hear the latest news and rumours from other slaves, who are discussing the events at Daznak's pit. It is argued whether Daenerys Targaryen flew off on the dragon or died trying. Tyrion states that she did not die because her body was not found. He briefly thinks on the moment when he almost revealed his identity to her, only to stop out of fear Barristan Selmy would prejudice Daenerys against him out of contempt for House Lannister. After getting the water, they are supposed to return to their camp, but Tyrion leads them to the tents of the Second Sons instead. He knows that right now, while Yezin is on the verge of death, is the best time for them to try and escape the grasp of the slavers. When they get there, Tyrion is recognized as the dwarf that Brown Ben Plum wished to buy, so they are brought to the captain. There, he reveals that he knows that Ben Plum knows who Tyrion really is, and that Tyrion knows that Ben is a Westerman of House Plum, and that the dragons were fond of him. He implies that he knows more about Plum's lineage than even Plum himself, and that Plum may have more Targaryen blood than he thinks. Ben Plum then recognizes Jorah Mormont, and Tyrion convinces Ben to let him and Mormont join the Second Sons instead of killing him in order to win a lordship from Cersei Lannister. Tyrion suggests they play a game of Savas as they continue talking. Chapter 58. Tormund Giantsbane, along with over 3,000 wildlings, pass through the wall at Castle Black. The price of their entry, which was negotiated between Jon and Tormund, is that the wildlings will yield all valuables so that they can be sold for food, as well as 100 boys as hostages. Initially, 2 girls are included in the 100 hostages, although Jon spots them and they are replaced by 2 new boys. Tormund voluntarily includes his own son as a hostage as a sign of good faith. Jon decides to take him on as his own squire. While watching the wildlings enter the wall, Jon and Tormund speak of many things. Jon mentions Melisandre burned the horn of Joram that Mance and the wildlings were supposedly going to use to break down the wall. Tormund tells Jon that although they did find that huge horn in the Skirling Pass, it is not actually the true horn of Jorman, or they would have used it when they assaulted the wall. Jon, confused, tries to decide whether it was Mance that lied to him or Tormund lying to him now about the authenticity of the horn. The rear guard of the wildlings with Tormund includes a warg who was accompanied by his boar. Ghost and this boar seem to be on edge around each other, and it is mentioned that they should be restrained while the wildlings are staying at Castle Black. Most of the wildlings will be relocated in the coming weeks. Later, Jon receives a letter from Cotter Pike saying that he is stranded at Hardhome and calls for help. He also reveals that the Braavosi captains on loan from Tycho would only allow wildling women and children aboard their ships, and that the Woods Witch has taken to calling them slavers. This explains Arya's report that the wildlings from Hardhome had been captured by slavers as told in The Blind Girl. He also says there are dead things in the water, lending a great deal of urgency to his message. Chapter 59. Sir Barristan attends Hisdar zo Larric's court under the unease that Daenerys Targaryen's absence brings. The Brazen Beasts now have a new commander, the king's cousin, Margaz Zolaric. Reznak keeps a strong voice in court, counseling the king. Hasdar is now acclaimed as a hero after his fight against Drogon. So Barristan notices the presence of Quentyn Martell and his 2 Dornish companions at court, remembering Prince Lewin Martell, his Kingsguard colleague, and also Quentyn's uncle. He considers the possibility that the poison locusts that Strong Belwas ate might have been meant for Hisdar, as part of a plot to direct Daenerys into marrying Quentyn, given that another of the prince's uncles was notorious for poisoning those who got in his way. Before he makes up his mind on the matter, 3 wise master envoys from Yunkai arrive, along with their sellsword Bloodbeard, to talk with Hisdar. They show Admiral Grolio's severed head as a gesture of intimidation, claiming his death as payback for the death of Yunkaius Zohanzik, who was trampled to death during the panic when Drogon attacked the fighting pits. Barristan reminds King Hisdar that Yukar's death was accidental, while the Yunkai representatives free 3 of the 6 remaining hostages. They demand that the dragons be destroyed as a condition for the release of the last 3 hostages. Barristan is also suspicious of Hisdar's lack of reaction, given that all 3 of the Westori kings he served under, Aerys, Robert, and even the supposedly weak Jaehaerys, would have responded to such an insult by ordering every member of the Yunkaish delegation killed. He also believed Bloodbeard is trying to start violence in order to get the plunder the peace has denied him. As the court is ended for further deliberation by the King's Council, so Barristan decides to counsel the Dornishmen. Despite appearing weak, the king has taken notice of Quentyn, and so Barristan considers it dangerous for them to remain in Meereen. He advises them to return immediately to Dorne, going so far as offering the coin for the trip, and reveals that there was an attempt at poisoning either Daenerys or her consort during the fighting pits reopening. Quentyn's shocked reactions reassure Sir Barristan that the Dornishmen had no part in the poisoning, but he still counsels Quentyn and his companions to leave Meereen and return to Dorne, for he considers his prospects of marriage unpromising and his situation dangerous. Chapter 60. Garrus Drinkwater reports after having spoken to Beans, Books, and Oldborn Bill in exchange for some gold. The 3 members of the Windblown agree to tell the Tattered Prince that the 3 Dornishmen would like to meet. Despite successfully delivering the message, Garrus insists the group should heed Barristan Selmy's warning, leave Meereen for Volantis, and ultimately return to Dorne. Quentyn wants to leave for Westeros as well, but fears arriving empty-handed, as he worries he will disappoint his father and Lord Ironwood, and face mockery by the Sand Snakes should he do so. Quentyn tells his companions they can leave without him, but they choose to stay. Denzo Dan finds Quentyn to discuss terms for the meeting. Denzo tells the Dornish prince to find a door marked with a purple lotus near the spice market at sunset the next day. Quentyn agrees and tells Denzo that the Tattered Prince can bring 2 men, as he will be accompanied by Drinkwater and Archibald. The 3 Dornishmen leave to meet the Tattered Prince an hour before sunset, bearing weapons. On their way, Archibald and Garrus point out that they might face violence or other retribution from the Tattered Prince for their betrayal. Quentyn agrees it is possible, but they continue walking. The 3 then discuss waiting for Daenerys' return and the possibility of killing Hisdar to allow Quentyn to marry her. Quentyn fears that his friends have lost sight of why they are in Meereen for Daenerys' dragons, and points out that he has Targaryen blood and can therefore tame at least one of the remaining 2. Garrus balks at his plan and points out that dragons will not care about his lineage. The prince argues the plan is necessary to grant meaning to the deaths of Cletus and William and to please his father. The 3 eventually find a door marked with a purple lotus and enter a large but dilapidated building. An older woman greets them and takes them to a dim cellar where Pretty Merys, Danzo Dahan, Kago Corpsekiller, and the Tattered Prince await them. Quentyn is wary as the prince is wearing mail and has brought 1 more man than they had agreed upon. Quentyn expresses his displeasure at the extra bodyguard, But the prince points out that Maris is not a man and remains resentful of the Dornishmen's betrayal, as it resulted in the imprisonment of several of his best men. To persuade the prince to join their side, Quentyn promises to double the amount being paid to the Windblown by the Yunkai once they arrive in Dorne, but the tattered prince is unmoved. Quentyn then reveals that he plans to steal one of the 2 remaining dragons in Meereen, and the prince names Pentos the price of his allegiance. Chapter 61. Jon Cunnington and the Golden Company have landed at Cape Wrath in Westeros, and managed to seize Griffin's Roost and other small castles by taking them unawares. The taking of Griffin's Roost was quite easy. The Golden Company only lost 4 men in the attack. Any raven trying to leave the castle was shot down, followed shortly by the castle's maester being thrown from his tower. After that, what was left of the garrison surrendered, taking his leave of the Golden Company officers by claiming to be going to pray at his father's tomb in the castle set. Jon, instead, goes to the battlements and reminisces over the time Rhaegar visited his home and seemed impressed with Connington's land. Jon then reflects on what happened next to his house. After Aerys exiled Jon, furious at his failure to stop Robert, the lands and title went to his cousin Ronald Connington, who had been Jon's castellan while he was in King's Landing. But after the end of Robert's rebellion, King Robert stripped Ronald of his lordship and gave most of House Connington's lands to houses that had fought for him. Jon, however, is glad that he will not have to fight his deceased cousin or Ronald's son, Ronnet, who was away fighting in the Riverlands to reclaim Griffin's Roost, not wanting to celebrate his return by killing one of his own kin. Nor does he blame his cousin any longer for taking advantage of his downfall, since, as far as Jon is concerned, the one responsible for House Connington's downfall is himself. Jon's musings then turn to where he lost everything, Stony Sept. Taking over pursuit of Robert from the Tyrells after the Battle of Ashford, Jon cornered the rebel in the town and began searching for him, but the search yielded nothing, as the townsfolk were protecting Robert, hiding him, and constantly moving him. All of Connington's efforts to find Robert, offering bribes, taking hostages, threats, and pardons, got him nowhere, and the delays bought time for Eddard Stark and Holster Tully to bring a rebel army to Robert's rescue. The rebels attacked Connington's men at the same time Robert and his followers emerged from the town in a counterattack, and the ensuing battle ended in a rebel victory. For years, Jon reflected that he insisted he did all he could, until Miles Toyne disabused him of that notion by pointing out that Tywin Lannister would have burned Stony Sept to the ground to kill Robert, then offered pardons to Stark and Tully when they arrived to convince them to give up and go home. Connington, however, knew this would mean killing everyone in the town, and he both didn't want to be branded a murderer and wanted the glory of slaying Robert for himself. Jon reflects that his failure at Stony Sept led to Rhaegar's death at the Trident and vows not to fail Prince Aegon as he failed his father. Rejoining his fellows, Jon takes note of the captives, including Ronnet's brother, sister, and bastard son. Most of the castle staff swear loyalty to him. Connington pays a visit to Howden, who is trying to find where most of the Golden Company scattered along the coast by the Volantene ships that transported them from Essos to send a message to Doran Martell to inform him that his nephew Aegon is alive, in order to gain the Dornish alliance. Jon reflects that he could not have expected loyalty from these men. If he had reclaimed his home while Robert and Renly still held the Stormlands. Holden also argues that they need to offer incentives to convince wayward lords to join them, as most of the gold and land will go to the Golden Company officers. Holden suggests offering the hands of Prince Aegon and Jon himself for marriage alliances. Jon, however, refuses. In the face of his illness and his insistence that Aegon must be free to wed Daenerys Targaryen if she ever returns home. In his chambers, Jon privately treats his grayscale with wine. If his condition became known, he fears that any lord still loyal to House Connington would abandon him. 4 days later, Prince Aegon arrives along with Duck, the first member of his Kingsguard. Jon recalls his disapproval of that choice, and how he argued with Aegon that they should leave places in his Kingguard open to both warriors of great renown or the youngest sons of important lords to add luster to their cause. But Aegon refused, saying all he wanted from his Kingsguard was their willingness to die, defending him, pointing out that Jon's criteria for the Kingsguard perfectly fit the Kingslayer. Jon informs him that his men plan to take Storm's End in 10 days. He had refused the suggestions of the Golden Company officers to make an alliance with Stannis Baratheon, who holds it, arguing that Stannis is Robert's brother, a rival claimant to the throne and leagues away from them with nothing to offer. Aegon agrees to this plan and tells him that he intends for the siege to go forward with one change. Aegon will lead the attack himself. Chapter 62. Asher Greyjoy is still a prisoner of Stannis Baratheon at the Crofters village between the lakes, being guarded by Alysanne Mormont. While they thought they would be only 3 days from Winterfell, the snows have kept them stranded for 19 days. Food has become a major concern. The supply of fish from the lake has been diminishing. They have already been relying on their dying horses as a source of food for a while now, and foraging has brought little result. Some men have even begun to resort to cannibalism. 4 men from House Peaseberry were caught eating parts of a dead man from House Fell. There are growing tensions between the Queen's men that Stannis brought with him from Dragonstone and the other people present, both local Northerners and the King's men that Stannis brought from Dragonstone and the Stormlands with him. Fueling those tensions, Sir Godry Faring, the Giant Slayer, Sir Corlys Penny, and Sir Clayton Suggs are about to burn the 4 cannibals in sacrifice for R'hllor, hoping to stop the snowfall. Northerners Artos Flint and Big Bucket Wool express dislike of the sacrifice. Arsha has noticed that Clayton Suggs is a cruel man and fears that he may eventually turn against her. Stannis himself has been retreating to a tower roof with a perennial flame for 4 days, since his squire, Brian Faring, was given a funeral burning after dying from the cold. He returns now, along with Queenman Sir Richard Horpe and Carhold's castellan Arnulf Karstark, whose men joined theirs 8 days past. There are rumours that Arnulf may be given Winterfell in Stannis' behest if they are successful at retaking the castle. Stannis authorises the sacrifice and watches it until its end. Sir Justin Macy remains close to Arsha and protects her from the worst of Clayton Suggs' threats. He also reveals that he is no longer a true believer in R'hllor, and hints that he knows more than he is telling. Justin offers to guard Arsha for a while, relieving Ali Mormont from that duty. The 2 of them eat some roasted horse in the hall. Stannis' knights are, however, lost by a lack of options, knowing that they are likely to die soon no matter what they do, since they have no food, nor are they in any condition to fight Roose Bolton's forces at Winterfell. Talk is tense and frustrated, and eventually Justin leaves the hall. Attempting to follow him, Arsha finds Clayton Suggs, who threatens her, but the 2 of them are surprised to find that riders are coming to Stannis' encampment. Assuming that this is an attack from the Bolstons and Freys, Clayton commands Arsha to warn the others while he bravely attempts to hold off the riders. But there is no immediate danger, for the riders are not hostile. It is instead the group of Tychos Nestoris, representative of the Iron Bank of Braavos, with 2 men of the Night's Watch and 7 Ironmen that he ransomed from Sibel Lock. Arsha recognizes Christopher Botley among them. The group has come by way of Winterfell, where they found Crowfoot Umber beating drums and blowing horns, and have brought Theon and Jean from Winterfell. Jean's nose is black from frostbite, and no one has referred to her by name yet, so it is not clear whether Tycho's group knows that she is not Arya Stark. Arsha fails to recognize Theon, who looks decades older than she knows him to be. Theon, however, reveals his identity to Arsha, much to her shock. Chapter 63. Victorian Greyjoy continues on his way to Meereen. Despite his crew's unease at Moqorro's continued presence, Victorian insists that the Red God will help them on their journey. Though his arm and hand are now burnt, they are stronger than ever. He says, "2 gods are with me now. No foe can stand before 2 gods." The Iron Fleet captures a number of trading ships. Giscari Dawn, Dove, 2 unnamed ships that he renames as Ghost and Shade, an unnamed fat galley, an unnamed trading galley, an unnamed fishing ketch, and a slaver galley named the Willing Maiden. Mokoro's prophecies are instrumental in the capture of these fleets. As a show of his appreciation, Victarion burns 7 Lyseni bed slavers as a tribute to both the drowned god and R'hllor. After the sacrifice, favourable wind rises for the Iron Fleet, which now numbers 60 ships with the new additions. That night, Victarion allows Mokoro to inspect the dragon horn given to him by his brother Euron. Mokoro reads the Valyrian glyphs displayed on the horn to Victarion, telling him that the horn's name is written as I am Dragonbinder. Mokoro goes on to explain that no mortal man can blow the horn and live. However, he states that who blows the hell horn matters not. The dragons will come to the horn's master. You must claim the horn with blood. Chapter 64. After a gathering of 11 faceless men, Arya is interrogated by Plagueface and deemed ready for her first assassination. Arya disguises herself again as Cat of the Canals and returns to Brusco's. While selling seafood at the Purple Harbour, Arya observes her target, an old man who sells insurance for captains, shipowners, and other merchants. When the kindly man suggests that the man might not be paying out for claims as he should, Arya determines that a family member of a client has prayed for the man's death at the house of Black and White. Arya eventually decides she will kill her target with poison, which the waif then helps her prepare. The kindly man informs Arya that she will need a new face for this job, since Cat of the Canals would be easily recognized. He and the waif lead her down into a chamber deep under the house of Black and White. The walls are covered with the mask-like faces, which Arya realizes are the faces of people who have died at the house of Black and White. The face chosen for Arya is that of a young girl who was abused to the point of permanent disfigurement, and who came to the temple seeking death. Arya's blood is used to soften the leathery mask into living skin, which then bonds to her head and becomes her new face. The kindly man warns Arya that she will suffer the nightmares of the girl whose face she has taken, but only for a time. His promise proves to be true, and that night Arya dreams of the abuse that was suffered by the girl at the hands of her father. The target is always accompanied by 2 guards, and the kindly man has forbidden Arya to kill anyone other than her target. So Arya must stalk the man for several days to find an opportunity. She eventually dispatches him by slipping a poisoned coin into the purse of one of his clients, knowing the old man selling insurance will bite into the shipowner's coins to test their legitimacy. Knowing that the target's heart would then soon give out after consuming the poison, the kindly man is pleased by Arya's success, and he raises her to the status of an acolyte. He gives her a black and white robe to wear while at the temple and restores her face. However, the next day she is to take a new face and leave for her first apprenticeship with someone named Isambero. Chapter 65. Cersei is forced to walk from the Great Sept of Baelor to the Red Keep as atonement for her confessed sins. It is the only way to escape the Sept, as her uncle Kevin will not oppose the faith, and Cersei does not have enough friends in the Sept to risk a trial like Marjorie Tyrell. Her only hope is a trial by combat. Cersei feels fear at the thought of being paraded through the streets naked, remembering the violence the small folk caused during the riot, but reassures herself that no harm will come to her. When morning arrives, her jailers arrive with a group of silent sisters who strip Cersei naked and shave her of every hair on her body. Cersei is then led by an escort of warriors' sons, among them her cousin Lancel, much to Cersei's disgust, to the courtyard, where Cersei finds herself standing close to the spot where Eddard Stark was executed. As the Septors accompanying her announce her sins to the watching crowd, Cersei muses first on how Joffrey undid all her plans and the work of Varys and Littlefinger had he done as he was told and sent Ned Stark to the wall. The Lannisters would have had peace with Robb Stark, a hostage in the form of Sansa, and the freedom to deal with Stannis and Renly Baratheon. But instead, Joffrey demanded Stark's head, and after that, everything fell apart. Cersei's thoughts turned to memories of how her father, Tywin, did away with his grandfather's mistress after his death, having her stripped naked and marched through the streets of Lannisport. But Cersei insists to herself she will not be broken and humiliated so easily. She is then forced to strip before the crowd and walk to the Red Keep. At first, Cersei walks with dignity, ignoring the insults and worse, such as rotten vegetables and a cat carcass, the crowd throw at her. But as the walk continues and the insults grow worse, mocking her faded beauty and signs of age on her body, Cersei struggles to maintain her composure. As she walks, Cersei begins to hallucinate, seeing faces of others in the crowd, her father frowning, Ned and Sansa Stark, along with Sansa's wolf staring accusingly at her, Tyrion laughing at her, and finally, the face of Maggie the Frog intoning her prophecy, "Queen you shall be, until there comes another, younger and more beautiful, to cast you down and take all you hold most dear." At this, Cersei breaks down in tears and runs for the Red Keep, collapsing as soon as she staggers into the courtyard. Kevin Lannister orders her covered up and removed, at which point Cersei is picked up by an 8-foot-tall giant of a man, clad in the armour and white cloak of a Kingsguard knight. Qyburn appears and introduces Cersei to his champion, Sir Robert Strong, and she is most pleased. Chapter 66. Tyrion has made an agreement with Ben Plum to join the Second Sons. He signs a number of agreements that he will pay about 50 higher-ranking members of the company 100 gold dragons. This amount increases for the higher-ranking officers and for Plum himself. He must sign a contract for 100,000 dragons along with land and a lordship. After this, he signs the Register of the Second Sons using his blood as ink. After this, he is told to go and find armor for himself and Penny. He returns to where Penny is sleeping to find her still distraught over the abandonment of the hog and the dog that were part of her show. Tyrion is hiding from her that the two animals have almost definitely been slaughtered by Yazin Zo Kazak's men. While they are looking for armor, they find Jorah Mormont outfitted in a random assortment of armor, which he claims is of decent quality. When Penny tells Tyrion that she dreamt that she was jousting with her brother again, Tyrion slaps her, trying to force her to quit her mooning and to realize that they must wear armor or likely die. Finally, Tyrion says that he will take care of making sure that the Second Sons turn sides again, since Tyrion and Jorah both agree that they are on the losing side of the coming battle. Chapter 67. So Barristan meets with Skarkaz Mokandik again, and they go through with their plan to seize Hisdar and the city, and have it ruled by a council until Daenerys' return. They decide that their word for going ahead with the plan will be Grolio, in reference to the hostage that was slain by the Yunkai. Skarkaz reveals that he was present in the throne room when Bloodbeard and the Slaver Lords made their insult, and that he and every one of the brazen beasts present would have killed the Yunkaish delegation in an instant had Hisdar given the command, raging that the Yunkaish would never have dared to do such a thing to Daenerys. The Shavepate goes on to explain to Sir Barristan that Hisdar's horrified reaction to Grolio's severed head was a sham, and the slavers couldn't care less about Yukaz Zoyanka's death in the pit. The whole thing was arranged so as to give Hisdar a pretext to kill the Queen's dragons before Volantis' fleet arrives. Despite Skarkaz's objections, Barristan insists that after Hisdar is deposed, they will order the Yunkai return their remaining hostage and withdraw their armies from Meereen, only going forth to do battle if they refuse. Selmy is also confident he can overcome Hisdar's guards, as they are only pit fighters, and Barristan believes men like that, who fight for the adulation of the crowd and only when they are called to, are no match for a knight of the Kingsguard, who must always be alert and ready to fight and die at a moment's notice to defend their monarch. Barristan and Skarkaz also dispute over trying to rescue the remaining hostages, Jogo, Hero, and Dario, as the Shavepate believes it is too dangerous to try. He is also particularly scathing about Daario, believing it would be better in the long run for Daenerys if the Stormcrows' captain were to die. Though he is aware Daenerys is in love with Daario, Barristan privately agrees, as he is well aware from history that the Targaryens have a propensity for choosing poorly in matters of the heart, choices that almost always lead to disaster. Prince Rhaegar loved his lady Lyanna, and thousands died for it. Daemon Blackfyre loved the first Daenerys, and rose in rebellion when denied her. Bittersteel and Bloodraven both loved Shiera Seastar, and the Seven Kingdoms bled. The Prince of Dragonflies loved Jenny of Oldstones so much he cast aside a crown, and Westeros paid the bride price in corpses. All three of the sons of the fifth Aegon had wed for love, in defiance of their father's wishes, and because that unlikely monarch had followed his heart when he chose his queen, he allowed his sons to have their way, making bitter enemies when he might have made fast friends. Treason and turmoil followed, as night follows day, ending at Summerhall in sorcery, fire, and grief. Scarhaz also mentions they have hostages of their own, and they can easily retaliate in kind if the Yunkai harm any of their hostages. But like his queen, Barristan refuses to harm the cupbearers due to his own aversion to killing children. Though disappointed, the Shave Plate agrees and promises that everything will be ready for the plan by nightfall. For the rest of the day, Barristan makes his rounds about the pyramid and trains with his boys. He thinks to himself that some of them might be ready for knighthood soon. However, as he wrestles with what he is planning to do that night, he decides it would be worse for the boys if they were knighted by a knight without honor. Just before his death, he lectures the boys about honor and thinks that someday maybe they will understand. He also warns Missandei not to leave the Queen's chambers, but refuses to answer her questions about his intentions. He also reflects on his own failures. One in particular, that he didn't defeat Rhaegar at the tourney at Harrenhal. Had he won, he would have crowned Ashara Dane, who he was enamored with, as Queen of Love and Beauty, and wonders that if he had, would Ashara not have killed herself? From grief over a child supposedly fathered on her by a Stark. Barristan considers that his greatest failure. During the night, after bathing and donning his armor, Sir Barristan goes to confront Hizdahr in his chambers. The brazen beasts let him past without incident. Barristan, using the pretext of delivering a message to gain entrance, tries to question Hizdahr, demanding to know if he is in league with the Sons of the Harpy, and if he had anything to do with the assassination attempt on Daenerys. Hizdahr's denial of the accusations do not convince Selmy, and when the old knight draws his sword, Hizdahr calls for the pit fighter Karaz, one of his guards, to defend him. Despite Barristan's effort to convince Karaz to surrender, the pit fighter attacks him. However, Karaz's inexperience of fighting opponents wearing armor is his downfall, and Selmy kills him quickly. Barristan tells Hizdahr, who desperately begs for his life, that he means to take Hizdahr to a cell, where he will be imprisoned until Daenerys returns. Suddenly, a cupbearer informs them that Reznak wishes to see the king. Barristan, surprised as he and Skyhaz had planned to imprison Reznak as well, asks why, and is told the dragons, Viserion and Rhaegal, have been loosed upon the city. Chapter 68. Quentyn goes ahead with his plan to steal the dragons, with the help of the Windblown Company. They make it to the pit where Rhaegal and Viserion are kept. There, however, they use the code word dog on the brazen beasts, who are actually part of the scheme to overthrow the king that very night. A fight ensues, and the 4 guards are slain, although Quentyn is almost slain by a spear. They enter and find that Rhaegal has also broken his chains since he was last in the pit, and that Viserion has created a cave for himself in the ceiling of the pit. Viserion is first attracted to Pretty Meris, as he is looking for Daenerys, but then tries to exit the pit. Throughout this encounter, Quentyn tries to dominate the dragons like he had seen Daenerys do with Drogon, but when he strikes Viserion with a whip, Rhaegal spews fire on him, setting him aflame. Chapter 69. Jon means to lead men to Hardhome to rescue the wildlings and men of the Night's Watch trapped there. Queen Selyse and Melisandre discourage him and want to leave them to their fate. However, Jon is determined to lead a rescue mission. While planning the mission with Tormund Giantsbane, Jon receives a letter from Ramsay Bolton. Ramsay claims that King Stannis is dead after a 7-day battle, that he captured Mance Rayder and flayed his spearwives, and that he wants his bride back, along with Theon, Melisandre, Val, Mance's presumed son, and Queen Selyse and her daughter. This changes everything, and Jon decides to send the bulk of the Night's Watch to Hardhome, with Tormund in command, while he will go to Winterfell himself and make Ramsay answer for his words. Jon knows that doing so will break his vow to not interfere in the wars of the Seven Kingdoms, so he is prepared to go alone. He asks if anyone will ride with him and gets an overwhelming roar of support from most of the wildlings, though not from his black brothers. Yarick and Bowen Marsh leave the hole with their men. Jon doesn't mind, as he appears to have more than enough men to go with him, and none of the Night's Watch will have to break their vows. When Jon is on his way to inform Queen Selyse, he hears the giant Won-Won roar and a man scream. When he arrives, a bleeding Won-Won is smashing dead Sir Patrick against a tower wall. Jon tries to calm the people who come running. When Wick Whittlestick slashes at Jon's throat with a dagger, just barely grazing him. While Jon is still trying to understand, Bowen Marsh and the others plant daggers in him, all of them saying, "For the Watch." By the time the 4th dagger slashes him, Jon passes out. Chapter 70. It is raining heavily in Meereen, for which Barristan Selmy is grateful. Otherwise, the fires caused during Viserion and Rhaegal's rampage might have consumed the entire city. There is no sign of the 2 dragons. They do not like the rain any more than men. Quentyn Martell is dead. It took 3 days for him to die. Out of respect for the prince, Sir Barristan had him placed in the Queen's bed, the same one he crossed half the world to reach. Missandei is the only one he could get to help tend Quentyn, for none of the other cupbearers were willing, and the Blue Graces never responded to his summons. He suspects the Pale Mare has carried them off. Missandei asks what is to be done with Quentyn's body, and Barristan replies that they'll find a way to send him back to Dorne, though unsure how. He advises Missandei to get some sleep, and she urges him to do the same, as she noted that he doesn't sleep very much. Barristan privately thinks it is not just needing less sleep than a younger man, as Grand Maester Pycelle once told him, but having reached the age where he fears to close his eyes in case he never opens them again. Barristan does not consider dying in his sleep a death worthy of a knight of the Kingsguard. For a brief moment, he wonders if Daenerys is dead, but then dismisses the thought, though he notes that each time it becomes harder to convince himself his queen is still alive. At dawn, Scarhaz comes to speak with him. The Shavepate is already aware that Quentyn is dead, and he informs Barristan that the Green Grace, who Barristan sent to treat with the Yunkai to make them release the hostages, has not returned to the city. In addition, while the city is secure, an angry mob is gathered outside the pyramid, demanding Hizdar's release, and that both dragons be destroyed. And since his arrest, the Sons of the Harpies have resumed their nightly murders with a vengeance. Barristan is shocked to learn they have killed 29 in the night, in contrast to 9 the previous night, and 3 the night before. However, despite Scarhaz's insistence, Barristan still refuses to kill the hostages in retaliation. The Shavepate tells Barristan, who is now the Queen's Hand, as head of a council ruling the city, that the council is waiting for him. Barristan does not want the position, but, in the absence of Daenerys, he doesn't trust any of the others to rule. Grey Worm and the captains of the Stalwart Shields, Mother's Men, and Free Brothers, along with strong Belwas, are present. Barristan informs them of Quentyn's death. Most of the council express contempt for the prince's actions, and many want his companions, who are at present imprisoned, executed for unleashing the dragons on the city. The fighting pits are to remain closed for fear that the noise and smell of blood will attract the dragons, though Marcelin suggests reopening the pits in the hope it lures Drogon back, and Daenerys with him. For the time being, the pits are packed full of livestock, from which the dragons are feeding regularly, and thus far there has been no further evidence of either Viserion or Rhaegal eating people. The The council are convinced that the Yunkai are never going to accept any terms beside the killing of both dragons for the return of the hostages. When asked what he will do when the terms are refused, Barristan replies, "Fire and blood." They quickly grasp his meaning. He intends to do battle with the Yunkai-ish army. A lengthy discussion regarding the battle plan follows, particularly regarding the deployment of troops, targets to attack, how best to use the Unsullied, and other such concerns. However, all agree that if they can destroy the slavers, the sellsword companies will abandon their paymasters, and the dragons may make their presence known in the fight, though Barristan cannot say if they will help or just kill indiscriminately, though he does note that if they come, it will help break Yunkai-ish morale. When the council adjourns, Barristan goes to the cell where the two Dornishmen are being held and informs them of Prince Quentyn's death. Garrus Drinkwater angrily blames Daenerys for it, causing a fierce argument between him and Selmy, who bluntly dismisses Garrus's claims Quentyn came for love, and asserts they came because Quentyn's father wanted the backing of Daenerys before daring to defy the Iron Throne. But Archibald Ironwood angrily tells Garrus to shut up before more can be said. Barristan then makes an arrangement with the two Dornishmen. In exchange for a ship back to Dorne and Quentyn's bones to return to his father, Barristan wants them to go back to the Windblown Company and tell the Tattered Prince that they will give him what he wants, namely Pentos, if he can free and protect the hostages. During the attack, the Green Grace returns, telling Barristan that the Yunkai have refused his offer, and that the only price they will accept is the death of the dragons. As they speak, the Shape-8 runs in and tells them that their trebuchets have begun flinging, not rocks, but corpses into Meereen. Chapter 71. Daenerys is walking back south through the Dothraki Sea, following a small rivulet that she thinks will flow into the Scar-Hazadan. She has spent her time flying Drogon, but couldn't make him fly her back. Instead, they have been staying at his lair, a small cave in a hill she named Dragonstone, as reference to the place where she was born. She gets sick on the way and has a number of hallucinations as she lies in the grass, bleeding and dying. These include visions of Quaithe, Viserys Targaryen, and of Jorah Mormont, and seem to revolve around the idea of forgetting who she is. Finally, a single Dothraki scout approaches her, but does not see her. The scout freezes as Drogon approaches, and then flees. Daenerys calls out for Drogon, as he flies over and mounts him. Drogon catches and devours a horse, and Dany joins him. This is how Khal Drogo, former Co of Khal Drogo, accompanied by 50 of his warriors, find her. Chapter 72. Lord Regent Kevan Lannister is hosting a small council meeting in the Red Keep's throne room. Neither Queen Marjorie nor Cersei are present, nor is Tommen, as Kevan thinks it is kinder to let him spend as much time as possible with his mother before her trial and possible execution. The Lord of Griffin's Roost, Ronnet Connington, stands before them, insisting that he is loyal to King Tommen and uninvolved with whoever claims to be his uncle Jon Connington and the Targaryen pretender he has brought with him, who have landed with the Golden Company in the Stormlands, attacking towns and villages as they march on Storm's End. Ronnet begs to prove his loyalty in battle, but the new hand of the king, Mace Tyrell, refuses, and orders Ronnet kept in his quarters for the moment. In addition to sending the men-at-arms Jaime sent to accompany Connington south, all former thugs of Gregor Clegane's, to the Night's Watch. Kevan has begun to resent the demands of Mace Tyrell as Cersei did, but he realizes he cannot openly oppose them. Tyrell and his bannerman Randall Tarly have both brought armies to King's Landing, while the Lannisters' standing army is still in the Riverlands. Tyrell insists that he will deal with Connington and his boy after Marjorie's trial, but both he and Tarly show much reluctance about it. Kevan, however, chides them. Tyrell then asks why Tommen can't declare Marjorie's innocence without a trial, but Kevan insists that defying the faith will send them straight into the arms of Connington or Stannis Baratheon at a time when the Ironborn are attacking the Western Lands as well. Mace Tyrell retorts that Paxter Redwine will drive the Ironmen back and that Stannis has to face both Roose Bolton and the cold climate of the north He also dismisses the threat John Connington and the exiles of the Golden Company pose, but Kevin is unsure. He still remembers when Aerys appointed Connington to the role of Hand, and while Tywin Lannister's assessment of Connington as unsuitable for the post proved true after his failure to kill Robert Baratheon at the Battle of the Bells, Kevin believes age has surely made Connington wiser, more cautious, and more dangerous. The small council all agree that Connington and his pretender must be crushed, lest Daenerys Targaryen receive word and leave Meereen to join forces with them. Pycelle suggests that they buy off the Golden Company, but new Master of Coin, Harry Swift, dismisses this idea. Thanks to Cersei's economic mismanagement, the treasury is nearly empty, the Iron Bank of Braavos still demanding its money. Pledges for new loans from Mia received no favourable response, and their hopes of replenishing the treasury with the fabled wealth on Dragonstone following Sir Loras's capture of the island have proven in vain. Mace Tyrell reacts angrily to that, arguing that Loras searched the castle and found no trace of gold, gemstones, or dragon eggs. Kevin diffuses the argument by suggesting Stannis likely took everything of value with him when he fled. Kevin also suggests that Harry's try Pentoshi Magister moneylenders, or else go to Braavos and deal with the Iron Bank in person. Next, business turns to the forthcoming trials. Kevin says that Cersei has chosen trial by battle, with Sir Robert Strong to represent her as her champion. Kevin also assures the council that even if Cersei proves her innocence, she'll be sent back to Castle Rock afterwards, and play no further part in ruling or Tommen's education. The meeting adjourns, intending to reconvene in 5 days' time, and leaving for later decisions about an inheritance involving House Rosby and 6 claims, as well as the preparations for Marcella's upcoming marriage. Mace Tyrell makes plain his scorn for the marriage, particularly after Marcella's injuries, and suggests a better match for her. Kevin muses that Mace likely has his son, Willis, in mind. He dismisses the idea, warning that reneging on Marcella's betrothal now could be all the cause Doran Martell needs to side with Connington. Harry Swift suggests that they get the Dornish to deal with Connington and his pretender. Kevin agrees that it would save them a lot of trouble. After Tyrell and Tarly are gone, Pycelle asks Kevin for guards, fearing that Mace Tyrell means to do him harm for his part in Cersei's claims about Marjorie. But Kevin dismisses his concerns. It is snowing heavily in King's Landing, and Kevin retires to his study for a time to warm up. He muses on the possibility of raising his son Lancel to the King's Guard to end his newfound piety, before his thoughts turn to Cersei, the charming and sweet girl once was. He believes, had Aerys accepted Tywin's offer and wed his son to Cersei, Rhaegar would never have looked twice at Lyanna Stark, and perhaps many now dead would still be alive. He then thinks on Cersei's walk of shame and how similar it was to what Tywin did to their father's mistress, but Kevin reassures himself it was necessary. The faith had to be appeased, and left unchecked, Cersei would have corrupted Tommen as she did Joffrey. Kevin then goes to Cersei's chambers, where he has dinner with her and Tommen. Cersei is very calm and guarded after her walk of atonement, which Kevin thinks a good sign. She makes a humble request that Tanya Merryweather attend on her once more after the trial, and that her son be brought to court as a companion for Tommen. She also asks after her brothers, but Kevin has no news of Jaime or Tyrion. He also says that he has imprisoned the remaining Kettleblack brothers for their crimes of fornicating with a queen. If they confess, he will send them to the wall. If not, they will face Robert Strong. A messenger then announces that Grand Maester Pycelle is asking for Kevin's presence. Kevin arrives at the Maester's chambers and enters to find a white raven sitting on the window ledge, a sign from the citadel that winter has come. Kevin turns to leave and is hit in the chest by a crossbow bolt. He calls out for help, but then sees Pycelle sat at his table, already dead. For one moment, Kevin calls out to Tyrion, thinking his nephew responsible, but a familiar voice tells him otherwise, as the real killer emerges, Varys. Varys explains to the dying Kevin that he bears the man no ill will, that Kevin is simply a good man in service to a bad cause, but he was becoming too successful in uniting the realm behind Tommen and undoing the damage Cersei had caused. The eunuch adds that Cersei will suspect the Tyrells, with help from the imp, for Kevan's murder. The Tyrells will blame her, someone will blame the Dornish, and the Alliance shoring up Tommen's hold on the Iron Throne will crumble, as Aegon makes his presence known at Storm's End and the realm flocks to the side of the Targaryens. Kevan insists that Aegon was killed during the sack of King's Landing, but Varys explains otherwise, that Aegon had been groomed since birth to be king, taught not just in skill at arms and ruling, but what it means to go hungry, and most importantly, that it is his duty to rule, not his right. Varys then summons some of his little birds and instructs them to finish the dying Kevan off. And that's it for A Dance with Dragons Explained. Thank you again for watching, and please check out our playlist on every chapter of A Song of Ice and Fire Explained. Also, when you get the chance, try out Fantasy Flights, a Game of Thrones board game, digital edition.